You started? Okay. All right, so I want to thank you all for coming for the Taking Care of Our Environment, Composting in a Bucket lesson plan. My name is Richard Stonebraker, and I'm from Frederick Community College, and this is part of the requirement for the ED 202 course that I'm taking. So if you guys have any questions, just stop me as we go through, and we'll keep moving right along. So the objectives of this lesson plan is by the end of the lesson, students will be able to identify greens and browns as they relate to composting, discuss what compostable materials are, make scientific predictions, and interpret the importance of composting to help the environment. So we do have a little bit of a warm-up. I know you guys are pretty much used to warming up. So first thing is, what is compost? How many of you guys do you know what compost is or have a pretty good idea? Anybody want to share out loud?
I think compost is decomposing materials that provide a shelter for insects.
Perfect. Anyone else? No one? Gully?
Isn't it the process where you turn it turns like all the like vegetables and everything left over into dirt?
Yep, pretty much. So compost is basically the same thing as dirt, soil. It's organic matter that happens in the soil. We're taking something, we're breaking it down, and we're returning it back to the soil. Another question, so how can composting help our environment?
Composting can help our environment by, like Cully said, it converts into soil, which will help plants grow and give them nutrients and eat.
Right. Exactly. Anyone else?
Keep stuff out of the landfill, like
Perfect.
vegetable stuff.
Exactly. So it helps to replenish organic matter in the soil, and as you guys said, it helps to keep things out of the landfill. There's so much stuff that can be composted that people throw away every day that could be returned back to the soil. So that's great. You guys had some really great answers. So right now we've got a little short video that I was excited to find out worked. So we're going to see if it still wants to work. And this just kind of talks about making the perfect compost recipe. I guess you guys can't see it, can you?
Most people think composting is as simple as throwing all food and garden waste
Let's change that. I don't know why it's not coming through on the...
into a container and leaving it there for a couple of years.
Can you guys see that?
While you will get compost
On the
that way,
screen.
you can produce much better compost and get it much more quickly if you follow these simple guidelines for the perfect recipe. There are 4 ingredients for good compost: greens, browns, air and moisture. These 4 need to be balanced correctly for best results. The ingredients you add to a compost heap contain carbon and nitrogen. The ratio of carbon to nitrogen determines whether we label it a green or a brown. Ingredients that have a relatively high nitrogen content and a carbon to nitrogen ratio below 30:1 are called greens. Ingredients with a lower nitrogen content, in other words a higher carbon to nitrogen ratio, are called browns. Colour isn't always a reliable indicator of what is a green or a brown material. For example, fresh grass clippings when spread out and left to dry are still considered a green ingredient, even though they've turned a brownish colour because really all they've lost is water. On the other hand, straw is always considered a brown because before it was cut the main stems had died and much of the plant's nitrogen had gone into the seed as protein. Good examples of greens to add to your compost pile are grass clippings, which haven't been sprayed with weed killer, vegetable waste, fruit peel, annual weeds before they've developed seeds, and old bedding plants. Don't compost animal products such as meat and try to avoid adding diseased plant material or fats and oils. Good examples of browns include sawdust, straw, wood chippings, shredded brown cardboard and fallen leaves. Bedding for herbivorous pets such as guinea pigs is ideal as their manure adds a bit of extra nitrogen to the mix. Compost decomposes much faster if you chop the ingredients up, So shredding woody materials and tearing up cardboard speeds up the process because there is then more surface area exposed to the microbes that decompose the compost. However, avoid shredded evergreen trees, such as Leylandi, because they don't compost well and the pine resin can inhibit seed growth. When making...
Right. So we're going to end that right there because the rest of it you guys don't goes into more details than what we need.
Compost. You want to...
It's got a mind of its own. Let's keep playing. Let's get rid of that. All right. So that kind of gives you a little bit of what greens and browns are, what makes up compost piles. So that takes us to the little sheet that I had handed out to you guys, which there's some pictures on there at the bottom in that long rectangle that you want to identify what are greens and what are browns. So the first one listed there is an alive leaf. Would that be a green or a brown?
Green.
Green, that's right, because it's alive. The next one's dead. It's a dead leaf, but so what would that one be? What would you consider that, a green or a brown?
Isn't that still green?
Still a green. Even though it's a dead dry leaf, it's still green. We've got a banana peel. I'm not going to pick every single one of them, but a banana peel, what would that be? Green. And at the very, very end, we have a chicken in. He's doing his business. Would that be a green or a brown? Close.
Green.
Green. And then you've got wood. You have wood and you have sawdust. At least I think that's a pile of wood and sawdust. Those are examples of browns. All right, great job. So it's compost is a great way to reuse material that gets thrown out. We said that earlier in the warm-up. Composting can be done easily on any scale. This is where we were talking earlier. Here's an example of a small home-scale composting pile. I had one for many years until it finally decided to break apart. And then these are some of the things that, like where I work down in for the USDA, is we have these massive composters where we're able to compost tons of compost at one time. So normally in your backyard you're doing a couple pounds, where something like that can produce a couple tons, which is like an elephant if you think about it. You know, that's how much we can move. And it's a valuable product. It adds nutrients to soils for planting. The organic addition means no harsh chemicals are added. No man-made chemicals have to be used. That makes it safer for the environment. So in the video, it talked about not using chemicals. You know, don't compost anything that's had chemicals with it. It said in the video, don't use meat. I like to stick by that. You can compost meat, but it takes a really long time to break it down properly, and you don't want to return something that could be diseased back to the soil, especially if you're going to use it to grow vegetables or something that you're going to eat. You don't want to get sick. Of course, there's the picture of the chart that you guys did. I should have clicked through. So when you make a compost pile, it shows you here that you want to layer it in browns, greens, browns, and greens. Does anybody know why we want to do a layering? Anybody think of a reason why we would want to layer everything together?
Even distribution of carbon and nitrogen.
Yep, exactly. Because what we're going to be doing is you're going to be turning a compost pile, and you want everything to kind of start off as a layer to begin with, kind of like a layer cake. And if you eat it, as you're chewing it up, everything's getting mixed together. So that's the same thing we're doing with compost. We want it to be mixed evenly. And all these little bugs down here will be happy because you're setting up a new home. And on your paper, I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but it says you're providing a home for the FBI, fungus, bacteria, and insects. So not the FBI that we love. So now we get to do the fun part. We don't really need that anymore anyway. And we'll just move this real quick. So a couple weeks ago, I started making, well, more than a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago, did some composting at work, and I brought some home with us, or with me. But I put some plastic in there. Do you think plastic can be compostable?
No.
Can it break down? I don't know if you guys are able to see it, but if you want to pass it around, the bag won't break. But this is what finished compost looks like. So this was cow manure. There was vegetables from local schools from where I work, mixed with grass clippings, leaves, wood chips, all kinds of stuff. And so this is what it turned into. And of course you can see that there's plastic in there, and plastic still hasn't broken down. If you get biodegradable plastic, that will compost, but it's going to take quite a long time for it to compost down. Does it have any kind of
sun chips bag?
Yep.
They said that was, you can compost that, and we tried it and it never did work.
Yeah, a lot of times they say some things break down, and they never do, because it takes an awful long time for them to fully break down properly. So we're going to kind of try to make compost in a bucket. So this is basically the same thing you guys, many of you have done it before, making compost in your houses. So we're going to try one more time, see if the plastic will break down. We'll give it a try. Maybe if we get the compost pile hot enough, even though we're going into winter, so it's not exactly the perfect time to do this, but we'll try. What I like to do is use some compost that's been finished, because it already has some of the microbial organisms in it. It's got a lot of material. Basically, this is like a starter. We're using this as a starter to help the next batch. Of course, if you're starting a compost pile with nothing, that you don't need to do this, but I like to do it. It makes it easier to kind of get things started. So we're going to put that in the bucket. And I tried to find a bigger bucket because I didn't want to make a mess in the house, but we didn't have one. So now I have some leaves. So what would these be?
Green.
All right, even though you see how they're dead, they're dried up, they're still considered a green though. So do you think we should put some of these in? All right, we'll put some of them in. You can thank Meyer, he was out there helping me get the leaves today. More like playing in them. And then I brought over some grass clippings. There's a nice patch in my backyard that's now bare because we haven't cut the grass lately. So we'll put some of those in there. How's that? That's some more greens. In the starter compost, there was some wood chips in there still, so that's going to serve as our browns. I don't know if you guys didn't really get to see that, but you can come up and take a look at it afterwards if you want. And then I got some lovely orange peels from my lunch the other day. So I figured, we'll let the worms have some oranges. How's that? And then for the purpose of here, I'm not going to mix it because I don't have a lid. I don't think Miss Jennifer wants to clean up a compost mess. But what you would want to do if you do this in a bucket is you'd want to put a lid on it, and then you would want to turn it, rotate it, get it mixed real well, and then just let it sit. You can sit it out in the sun. The more that a compost pile gets sun, the better off it cooks. Got a question? If you do composting right, it doesn't have a bad smell to it. It should have like a sweet aromatic smell, is what we've been taught. However, I guess it also depends on what you put in it. At work, we've had some poultry manure added into our compost, and then that stinks because it smells like chickens and stuff. But if you do it right, it shouldn't smell. So let's just share aloud because we don't have time to write anything down. But I know you've already said it, but do you think the plastic's going to break down?
No.
Probably not. What about the orange peels and the rest of the stuff that's in there? That'll break down there, right? And then we'll be able to use it. Have you ever put like chicken bones or any kind of bones into a compost pile? Do you think they would break down?
No.
Take a really
Like
long time.
peach pits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
No, we don't put those in either.
Very yep. That will take quite. As they said in the video, a lot of times it's better if you can grind stuff up because that speeds up the process. And you'd have to have an awful big grinder to get some peach pits ground up. So, that wraps everything up. Does anybody have any questions about composting for, like making compost?
I got some.
Oh, you've got some, all right.
So, yeah, you're supposed to mix it up and stuff. You should add water.
Yep. So, in the video it showed about the 4 things that make compost. You want water, air, greens, and browns. So you don't want compost to be sopping wet, but you want it to be moist, because if you add moisture, that's going to make the microbes happy, and it's going to help speed the process up. It also has to do with the temperature. If you wet something down and let it sit in the sun, it kind of starts to produce steam. And a compost pile, it's called cooking, and that's what we're doing to compost, is we're cooking it. You want it to get nice and hot, you want it to get steamy. Have you ever stuck your hand in the compost pile and felt how warm it is in the winter? Yeah, you might not want to do that, but if you put a glove on it, sometimes it's fun to find out, because you stick, even if you turn it in the winter, you see all this steam and stuff rising off of it. That's because a compost pile can be 100 to 100 plus degrees inside, just because of the process of moisture being in there and everything breaking down that generates heat.
Yeah, that kind of leads into our next one.
Your next one, all right.
Does composting continue during the winter?
Yes. Composting can be a year-round thing, but it will slow down in the winter because of it being so cold outside. So what they recommend in the wintertime is that you cover your compost pile with a tarp. You still have to let air get into it, but you want to keep it, you kind of want to at least cover the top so the heat doesn't rise out from up top. So it will continue, it's just going to be a slower process than in the summer.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else?
Are used tea bags can you compost used tea bags?
I would think so, yes. I've never done it, but I would imagine the tea bag over time, the tea leaves surely would be compostable, and I'm pretty sure the tea bag over time would break down as well, because it's a paper product. So over time, paper is going to break down. Anybody else? Any more questions? All right, so who wants to give me an example of a green? But it can't be any of the ones we put in here. So think of something that could be a green. This is our assessment activity. So,
Watermelon.
Watermelon. There you go.
Flowers.
Flowers. Think about a brown too. What could be a brown? Sawdust.
Sticks.
Sticks. Anybody else? What are we all holding in our hands? Paper. What's paper made out of?
Wood.
Wood. It's made out of trees. So even though it's not brown, this would still be considered a brown. Cardboard, all that type of stuff.
Tea bags that Nicole said.
Do what?
Tea bags then?
Yep. Tea bags. So if I can find where I put this. All right. So I've got these pictures for you guys to take home to hang on the fridge. It kind of will help you to see what, it's a little blurry, but to remind you what can be composted, what can go in. And every time you go to the fridge and you open the door up, you'll see this, and maybe you'll stop and think twice, okay, we can put this in a compost pile, or what did Richard tell us? and you'll think. So I'll go ahead and pass these out, and that ends the lesson for today. Thank you, guys.